Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now you can see I'm not at Longmeadow today, I'm in a glorious wildflower meadow in Herefordshire, and that is because today's programme is devoted to the plight of our wildflowers, and it is a plight because at one time the country was covered in meadows like this, but since the Second World War we've lost 97% of them. That is over 7.5 million acres have disappeared. And wildflower meadows are not just beautiful, they are really important. They support a huge range of wildlife, including over 400 species of insects, and can have up to 300 different types of flower in an acre. So in this special programme, we shall be looking at the role of wildflowers for our wildlife, in our history, our culture, for our landscape, and critically, what we gardeners can do to help. Coming up on today's programme, Arit has been to Great Dixter in Sussex to learn about the startling discoveries made when they began to look more closely at the wildlife sharing their famous borders.
Under the stone, they found a spider that hadn't been recorded in Sussex since 1903, and I thought, well, hold on, you know, there's a lot more to Dixter than meets the eye.
Francis meets the garden designers Jim and Joel Ashton to find out how they put wildlife at the very heart of all their designs.
From a very early age, we were gardeners of a different sort, you know, and thinking, how do we encourage wildlife through our gardening?
And I've got a special appointment at Highgrove, the home of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, to discover how a pioneering initiative is helping to safeguard the future of our meadows.
When he came to Highgrove, it was the opportunity that he could do something, recreate a meadow and start to show people that this can be done.
This glorious 170-year-old wildflower meadow in the heart of Herefordshire is special, but it didn't used to be. You used to be able to find meadows like this right across the country in every single county. And Adam has been to Lincolnshire to meet Mark Schofield of the Wildlife Trust to discover the importance and role of the wildflower meadow in our countryside.
Wildflower meadows, I'm not sure there's anything more beautiful in the world. They're part of our landscape, but also they're part of our heritage. But the scary thing is that we have lost so many of them, and they're still under threat. Mark Schofield is from the Wildlife Trust, and he has grave concerns about the future of our wildflower meadows. Do you know, Mark, this is an absolutely stunning meadow. It really, really is.
Getting a meadow feeling.
I am. But they're becoming a rarity, aren't they?
Sadly, yes. Yeah, we think we've lost an area of wildflower-rich meadow 1.5 times the size of Wales since the 1930s. The intensification of agriculture, fertilising the soil, it's all adding up, it's accumulating, and it's changing the balance.
And, you know, losing that flower, in a sense, it's the knock-on of that. What we lose and goes with it is scary, isn't it?
Well, yeah, our permanent grassland, it's great at maintaining a continuity of nectar supply for our pollinators that need that throughout the year, especially our wild ones that do the bulk of the work. This is almost like the bottom row in a house of cards upon which everything else depends, the green and growing wildflowers that support our whole ecosystem.
Earlier on you talked about supporting pollinators, but it's not just that, is it? Places like this.
Not just pollinators, think of the reptiles, the amphibians, the birds we can hear singing.
Yeah.
And if we conserve the green and the growing stuff here at our feet, that's supporting the rest of the ecosystem, the rest of the food chain from the bottom up.
But some of those birds are seriously under threat, aren't they?
You're right. Think of the yellowhammer. We can hear linnet, meadow pipit. They're all declining in breeding numbers and the range they cover.
But also, as well, it's our heritage, isn't it?
I mean, this is a window into the past. This is really, you know, something that can evoke a sense of place, sense of your own local history.
But more than that, I look here in front of me, that could be a herbaceous border in the middle of my garden, couldn't it?
And you'd never need to weed that. Perhaps cut it and clear it away once or twice a year, just to keep things neat outside of the key flowering season. But it's every bit as structural and colourful as you might plan for your own garden. Greater knapweed here, Centaurea scabiosa. And you might well have that as cultivated stock in your own border.
Exactly that, isn't it? That so many of these plants are basically where our ornamental plants have come from.
So true. Field scabious, Nautia arvensis, a member of the teasel family. And, you know, again, that's giving you a lovely, high, nodding raft of colour. And over there, a puddle there of blue, just like a little understory in the meadow. That's just a cluster of harebell, Campanula rotundifolia.
And we say about birds, but butterflies as well.
Equally charismatic, and they're gracing the whole view that we have here today. So I can see meadow browns and gatekeepers, and we'll see some marbled whites probably. And these are butterflies, these caterpillars, just eat grasses, but now they need to nectar in their adult stage on these wildflower blooms.
Yeah. You know, you walk into one of these meadows in the summer months, and I think a lot of us think that that's when they're doing their work, but they're not, are they?
Not just then, springtime, through summer, into late autumn, and they're supplying pollinators with nectar and pollen, and they're colourful in our eyes too.
Yeah, they are. They do put a smile on your face. Coming and spending time in a place like this, I don't think I could become any more detached from our everyday life. But to think that there's only 3% of these left in the country is devastating. That said, us as gardeners, if we all did a little bit, I think we could make a massive difference.
This meadow in Herefordshire is one of the surviving 3%. And we know that for the last 170 years, it has looked pretty much like this. I say pretty much because meadows vary from year to year, but there are certain key plants that will crop up again and again. And at the moment, one of the most obvious and glorious is the common spotted orchid. There are thousands of them, sprinkled across the field, everywhere you look. And they come in colours ranging from pink to lavender. There's even a pure white one there, just popping up. And we tend to think nowadays about orchids as something exotic and tropical. Well, they are exotic, but they're certainly not tropical. We have fabulous orchids in this country, and many of them grow in our meadows. They have certain fascinating growth patterns. Their seed is like dust, and it takes 7 years from seed to flower. But in order to get orchids and other flowers, you must have grass that isn't too lush. And to ensure that, you need this plant. Now this, if I pick it, is the yellow rattle. And it's called yellow rattle because if you shake it, the seeds rattle in the cases. It's got a yellow flower, it's an annual, and it's partly parasitic on grass. They call it the meadow maker because it feeds on the nutrition that the grass needs and weakens the grass. It allows plants like orchids to grow. If you have too much grass, it dominates, and then you get a monoculture, and the wildflowers disappear and they don't come back. But if you sow yellow rattle, everything follows in its wake. You get plants like red clover, which they used to call bees' bread, because it is wonderful for bees. They love it. And just next to it is this, which is the bird's foot trefoil, sometimes called the egg and bacon plant, because it has touches of red with the yellow. And in fact, this isn't particularly rare, but it's important in meadows, because no other plant is so supportive of insect life. They say over 160 different species of insect feed off the egg and bacon plant. Now, however lovely this is, I can see that you might be thinking, how on earth does this relate to me and my garden at home? Well, there is a connection to be made. And to discover more about that, Eric went down to Great Dixter and met the head gardener Fergus Garrett, who thought he knew Great Dixter intimately, but recently he's been making some fascinating discoveries.
Fergus, you've been here over 25 years, and I'd have thought that you would know every inch of this garden, you know, every flower, every blade of grass, but recently you've had some new insight.
Well, Aaron, I thought I knew it inside out, this place, but actually I hadn't really opened up my brain to the wildlife side of things. We're not planting a plant because it attracts pollinators. We want to create an ornamental garden, so we've just gone ahead and done that. But secondary to that has been all the wildlife that's come along. And I think the interesting thing for me has been that I expected all the wildlife to be out in these meadow areas, but all the results are showing that these things are here in the garden, and now you know that you're sharing it with all those wonderful creatures that used to be throughout the land here. We can expand on that and make sure that those populations grow.
Recently you got some new revelations, I hear.
I asked the British Archaeological Society to come here, and under the stone they found a spider that hadn't been recorded in Sussex since 1903, and then we were away, and next thing we know it, we're front page of the British Archaeological Society magazine, 4 pages in there, and I thought, well, hold on, you know, there's a lot more to Dixter than meets the eye.
The person who delivered this amazing news is entomologist Andy Phillips. What sort of habitats do you have to create in the garden to enable all of the biodiversity?
You need to provide the different microhabitats, and that's what they do here in Great Dixter in abundance. The log piles, the bare ground, the sandy banks. It's very well known that how important ponds in gardens are, you know, especially for amphibians, dragonflies, water beetles. But what is not well known is actually there are some pollinator groups that actually have larval aquatic stages, such as droneflies, which are important pollinators.
Yeah.
Or even in a stump of a tree, which is hollowed out and water collects in it. That's a very important habitat for some hoverfly. In the thatched roofs here at Great Dixter, we get hundreds of pale-footed black wasp, which preys on aphids within the gardens. Within each nest burrow, they'll be collecting about 200 aphids.
Why is biodiversity so important in the garden?
Creates a very nice balance in the garden, I think. There are certain things that are eating some of the nasties so that we don't feel the urge to sort of spray everything, because the insects are doing that job.
Oh, this is a fantastic wall. You get quite a variety of different bees actually nesting in the loose mortar and the crumbling parts of the wall. But one of the most abundant species here is the green furrow bee, tiny little metallic green bee.
Mexican daisy, I mean, presumably that's good because it flowers long times?
Got a very long flowering time, so there's a fantastic nectar and pollen resource on this wall, and especially as it's south-facing, it heats up, and so you get huge variety of mining bees and furrow bees actually collecting pollen.
You know, you've got quite short grass here and then you've gone longer. Is that deliberate?
Well, this is a meadow that was cut, and this is the mown bit. But you don't need to mow this all the time, because if you look in here, you know, there are lots of little sort of vetches and odd bits of dandelion and sort of clover and all those sort of things that would be our lawn weeds, and they provide an interesting nectar and pollen source for certain insects.
The taller meadow and the shorter lawn with the bare patches is really important for a lot of different species of mining bee. Mining bees will nest, you know, in the ground in these little bare patches, and they would then use the dandelions, this flush of dandelions in early spring as a pollen and nectar resource. I
know this garden wasn't created as a wildlife garden, but what do you think you've done to kind of really keep that going in terms of your gardening practices?
The fact that we don't cut everything down at this time of year, and we've always had a long season of interest at Dixter, which gives you a really long season of pollen and nectar sources. And so it's not only is good for insects to lay their eggs in the stems of grasses, and we've got the seed heads there that are so nice for the birds as well as aesthetically, the winter skeletons are wonderful with a bit of hoarfrost over the top of them in the winter.
The botanical diversity of a garden such as Great Dixter is really good for a whole range of invertebrates, but particularly moths. And this is a typical sort of autumn species of moth called the myrtle du jour.
There he is.
Yeah.
He certainly is it's more like Marvel du jour.
Yeah, it's
fabulous.
a stunning little... It feeds on oak buds and then oak leaves later on, and comes out in sort of September or October. Well, some moth species actually are pollinators, so they will actually be feeding on flowers and pollinating flowers the same as butterflies do. In Britain, there's about 2,500 species of moth and sort of around 60 species of butterfly. So, yeah, the diversity of moths is much greater.
And they're an important food source as well. You see, they're part of that chain, so the birds and the bats and those sort of things will take the moths, so they're all part of that web.
And that really is the classic Great Dixter view, isn't it?
So the interesting thing about this is that it relates to somebody with a smaller garden, because collectively a number of small gardens working together can have the same effect. The wildlife doesn't need to exist out there in nature reserves and out in the countryside. It can come into these suburban and urban places.
There are two things that I take from that. The first is it's never too late to learn something new. And the second thing is that every garden is really important, because plants and animals don't differentiate between a meadow in Herefordshire or a big garden like Great Dixter and your back garden, wherever it might be. If you've got the long grass, you've got the pond, the creatures will come. And there are 23 million gardens in this country. If everybody does something, they connect. And 23 million gardens make a really significant habitat, and that is going to make a difference. Plant Life is a charity at the forefront of the campaign to save our wild meadows and grasslands. And these fields are one of their protected reserves. Botanical specialist Dr. Trevor Dines is keen to get us all involved in the fight to protect our precious wildflower heritage. Whilst I can see that wildflower meadows are beautiful, they bring joy to one's heart, and personally I think they're very precious and should be preserved. We live in a very overcrowded world. Are they a luxury that sooner or later we're just not going to be able to afford?
No, I don't think so, because, food production is only ever going to increase. We've got a growing population, that's never going to change. And those crops will need pollinating, so we have to have pollinators with us. We can't exist without them. If we bring these wildflower meadows, or even just strips of these wildflower meadows, into our fields, there's two benefits. You get predator control as well as the pollination. And the beauty of this is that yields will start to increase, so we can make these work for us. Then you've got things like flood control. A landscape like this holds onto the water much better than it would for an arable field. Not only that, you've got things like carbon capture as well. People think that woodlands are so important for carbon capture, but a wildflower meadow actually stores, or all grasslands store their carbon underground in that soil. And there's as much carbon in the soil underneath us here as there is in that woodland canopy. And is it good for grazing animals? These are packed full of plants that are really important for the animals themselves. Back in the olden days, the farms around here over in Wales, they would have had, each one would have had a cae ysbyty, a hospital field, and that was somewhere where they would put sick and injured animals, and they knew that those animals would forage the plants that they needed to get better. It was a place where they would recover faster. So things like this bird's foot trefoil, for example, we're just learning that the tannins in that reduce internal parasites in livestock. So there's medicinal values for this. And the sward that comes out of this is packed full of amino acids, proteins and minerals. And in fact, meadows like this can be as productive, if not more productive, than a typical agricultural sward.
So if we could persuade people in farms and gardens to have a whole quilt, a patchwork of wildflower meadows evenly spread out, that would be completely beneficial.
That's what we had in the past, and it's that tapestry that we need to get back. I mean, you can have a fantastic wildflower meadow packed full of species with all those pollinators in place within 7 to 10 years. If we just give them that chance, these things can come back very, very quickly into the landscape.
Clearly, these ancient meadows are really valuable and important and should be preserved at all costs. But there are other ways of taking the idea of a meadow into your garden. And Nick has been to Stoke-on-Trent to visit a garden that has created its own twist on the meadow.
Here at Trentham Gardens, Carol and her team have been actively growing their own meadows to show gardeners just how they can make a positive impact with wildflowers.
Carol, we're stood in a beautiful meadow. It's incredibly diverse, beautiful range of plants, but this is just one example of the type of meadows you can create, isn't it?
It is, yeah. This is an ornamental meadow as an alternative to a wildflower meadow using British native species.
And I guess the key difference is an ornamental meadow like this is predominantly alien species from overseas, as opposed to a wildflower meadow, which is very much just using our native species.
That's correct, yes. The ornamental meadow has a much longer flowering period because you're using different cultivars of plants that are going to give you succession. So this starts flowering end of June and will flower right the way through to the first frost in November.
So what would you expect to find in a typical native meadow mix? What species, which plants?
So in an annual native species mix, we'd see these blue cornflowers that we've got, the red field poppies, and then in a perennial mix, it can be quite a diverse range of different types of daisies, oxeye daisies, for example.
And then an ornamental mix like this, they can literally be from anywhere, can't they?
They can indeed. We've got Phycelius, and we've got the Coreopsis with the yellow daisy flower with the dark throat to it. That's fantastic for giving us really late season colour.
I mean, this Ami is something I consistently see in ornamental mixes. I mean, it feels a bit like our native cow parsley.
Yes.
Brilliant for pollinators, loads of pollen in there, and it isn't just butterflies and bees, but it's things like the parasitoid wasps, which help balance the other pests in your garden.
So the ornamental mix has been selected to have good open flower structure, good landing pads for different types of pollinators, and it's giving you a longer season of flower, but it's maybe not the niche for the insects that are in your area by comparison to choosing a native mix.
The annual ornamental meadow that's behind us is looking absolutely glorious and, dare I say, effortless. But I'm sure it took a bit more than that. So what was the process you used to do this?
Because the soil is so poor in this area, what we've done is put a very thin layer of composted green waste over the top, sown the seed into that, and literally then just stepped away from the meadow and just let it get on with itself.
Wow, so this spectacular-looking thing was just a one-off job back in spring and no input, no water, no nothing?
No water, nothing else added to it.
I think that's just brilliant because, I mean, a herbaceous border this size would have been tens and tens of hours and water and feed and staking, yet arguably this looks as spectacular but with virtually zero maintenance.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's fantastic. As if it was all this easy, it'd be great.
Carol, we're all very aware that British wildflower meadows are under serious threat. But as gardeners, what can we do on our plots to account for that habitat loss?
There's loads of things that people can do. If you've got a large garden, then you could do something broad scale like this with loads of colour, whether it's annual or perennial. If we've got a smaller plot, we could look at making the lawn slightly smaller. So those tricky bits to get the mower in at, the bottoms of fences, make that wider and go in with a mix there, or the bottom of a hedgerow.
So that gives you the sort of a meadow strip, effectively.
Yes, yeah, and looking at shrub borders and perennial borders where we've got some gaps and sowing an annual mix through those would be fantastic, give lots of colour.
I guess the nice thing about doing that is it will set up a seed bank in your existing borders, so when little chinks open up, then those plants will germinate in subsequent years.
Yeah, for sure, that would be fantastic.
So we can make a difference in our gardens.
Certainly, yeah. Bring lots of plant material into the gardens and really provide that habitat.
I think that shows that you can make something really special by taking the inspiration of a wildflower meadow, but instead of using it in grass, using it in cultivated ground. And also, that's very good for wildlife. Now, still to come on today's programme. I meet Debs Goodenough, the head gardener at Highgrove, the home of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, to find out more about the Prince's own wildflower meadow and a very personal project he launched to help conserve our wildflower heritage.
His Royal Highness wanted to halt the decline and start to put back what had been lost.
Carol picks her top plants for creating a wildlife-friendly border.
The more you've got, the more your garden's going to be an oasis, a restaurant where insects are going to flock.
But first, Francis meets Jim and Joel Ashton, designers better known as the Butterfly Brothers, who always put wildlife right at the core of their designs.
We all know that planting native wildflowers, trees and shrubs is the best way to guarantee an abundance of wildlife in our gardens. But the good news is, if formal design is more your thing, you don't necessarily have to compromise. This garden is just over ½ an acre and it's in the centre of Bishop Stortford in Hertfordshire. Stansted Airport is just over there, and yet this whole garden is a stunning haven for wildlife. So how did all this begin?
It was from really a feral childhood, wasn't it?
It was very feral,
Kicked out the door in the morning and then brought back in at dinner time. But we had a wildlife pond in the garden, and we kind of spent most of our Saturday and Sundays sort of looking into that and seeing what we could find and teasing newts out of the weed with a maggot on a piece of fishing, our dad's fishing line. And,
oh, wow.
You know, so it was really, really great, and it kind of went from there, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a total immersion in the natural world. Our mother's side, they were all keen gardeners. That was naturally going to rub off, but it was always, she'd say, why are you messing about with nettles and thistles? You know, so from a very early age, we were gardeners of a different sort, you know, and thinking, how do we encourage wildlife through our gardening? So that it started in a really nice way, you know, and then progressed into something, you know, that we do now, which is quite lovely.
This garden is one of the first the brothers built back in 2014. Homeowners Nigel and Jill Kirby wanted to create a host of different wildlife habitats, along with more formal and herbaceous areas. They were made possible and overlap thanks to some very clever design.
It's about thinking outside of the box and thinking, you know, not just to use the flat spaces, but the vertical spaces as well. So, for example, behind us, we've got this lovely oak trellis screening, which doubles up not only as a focal point with that log wall in the middle, you know, that in turn is a little habitat for creepy crawlies, but as well the double lattice screening that we've put either side of it Once those climbers, such as the clematis or the honeysuckle, have grown up through it to create a nice dense screen, blackbirds, robins and that sort of thing will nest in it as well, so it's a double whammy.
And sort of dual purposing things, so like this fence doubles up as an insect house on the other side.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're sort of not necessarily noticing it too much, but it is there and it's doing a job.
Absolutely.
Wildlife can love even the most formal features. This urn is a great focal point, but birds bathe underneath in the drips and on the top. And in the borders, the brothers combine lots of wildflowers, like this lady's bedstraw, alongside more traditional plants.
It really will create a fantastic variety of colours and a long flowering period, of course, which is the key thing.
And the things that are popular. You know, nowadays people love having digitalis and nigella in amongst their flower borders as well, so it's really come into fashion to use those plants too. So it's not a compromise on the aesthetic, but it does a job as well. Amazing. Just look at that lavender, it's teeming with bees.
Hundreds of bees, yeah.
And how do you feel straight lines versus kind of curvy lines? Is there a preference in terms of wildlife? Is there a better way?
It's purely on aesthetics, you know, at the end of the day. If you've got a border that's 3 foot deep on a south-facing wall, you know, the bees and the butterflies are going to love it just the same as if it's got some, you know, kind of ebbs and flows. Wildlife doesn't care whether it's a straight line or curve.
There we go, see the myth. You don't have to have a natural-looking garden to have a wildlife-friendly garden.
Absolutely not, no.
Unsurprisingly, the brothers are very keen on attracting butterflies and moths to their gardens. There's even a moth border here, filled with nectar-rich, strong-smelling plants in white and cream to help night-flying moths to find a good meal. But that's not all.
Good food plants will bring butterflies and moths into your garden. But to keep the population growing, it's so important that you also provide them with places where they can lay their eggs.
Some caterpillars have evolved to feed on specific plants, and others are less fussy, so the edges of the meadow are full of caterpillar favourites.
So growing in the woodland border here, amidst the wildflowers for the nectar, we've got these shrubs, alder buckthorn and this buckthorn, and these are to attract the brimstone butterfly. And if you look closely, you can see there's just a larvae there, one of the caterpillars.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that's going to turn into a butterfly quite soon. It's nearly ready to pupate. So again, you can see that they're pulling in. There's another one down here. It's pulling the butterflies in. That's going to keep them here and breed, so that's quite exciting.
Incredible. So different species will bring in different species of butterfly.
Yeah, exactly.
Lots of caterpillar favourites are likely in our gardens already. Holly and ivy, for example, are used by the holly blue butterflies, and they also give homes to nesting birds. Even just longish grass brings in this meadow brown butterfly.
Do you have favourite species of caterpillar or moth or butterfly?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's hard to come here and choose one because there's so many usually. Also in Mullein, we grow verbascums, which many people are familiar with.
Yeah.
And we've got some great Mullein on the chalk bank over there that seeds around every year. And there's some lovely Mullein larvae on that at the moment, some big caterpillars. So
will they be moths or butterflies?
They're moths, so that's, again, another species, you know, that's always here every year, and that numbers are increasing because we're planting those. So it's really conservation in action.
And how does that make you feel, having impacted so positively on the environment and created a beautiful garden at the same time?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I don't blame you.
It's really nice, yeah.
I am blown away by the diversity of wildlife in this garden. I've even seen lizards amidst the huge array of insects, all right in the middle of Bishop Stortford.
That shows that you can make a garden that is really good for wildlife of any kind and at any level. Now, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales has long been a champion of Wildflower Meadows. And the other day I had the good fortune to go to his own garden at Highgrove and meet his head gardener, Debs Goodenough, to look at and enjoy the wildflower meadow that he has made there. The meadow surrounding the house at Highgrove was created over 30 years ago. During early summer, it's filled with a wide variety of wildflowers, including yellow rattle, oxeye daisies, red clover, and a range of grasses. Deb's Goodenough has been the head gardener here for 11 years, and one of her many tasks is to maintain this wonderful expanse, which is now in its full summer glory. What prompted His Royal Highness to make a meadow on this scale? Because it wasn't a normal thing to do back then, was it?
No. His Royal Highness had found out that it was sort of 95% of all wildflower meadows were lost in the years between the Second World War and the early 80s. Things were ploughed, sprayed, change of management, and he wanted to stop that, halt the decline, and start to put back what had been lost. When he came to Highgrove, it was the opportunity that he could do something, recreate a meadow, and start to show people that this can be done.
In order to develop the meadow, His Royal Highness began a collaboration with the naturalist and conservationist Dame Miriam Rothschild, who for many years had campaigned to introduce wildflowers to gardens, parks and motorways using a seed mix that she had created.
His Royal Highness took her advice and she gave him a mix which was called Farmer's Nightmare. And that was it's primarily an annual mix, but His Royal Highness had some perennials mixed in with that. And it's all the things that farmers don't want in their crop fields. And it gave you that sort of real flush of annuals, the poppies, the things like that. And so that really gave that first sort of blast of colour and interest in the meadow.
The seed mix contained different species that were typical of the natural flora of Gloucestershire. Taking her advice, this was done almost as a showpiece to show people what they were missing.
That's right. Dame Miriam Rothschild reckoned that she could put a fairly good meadow back in about 15 years.
That's still quite a long timescale for most people in their back gardens, isn't it? What can they do to take this idea and translate it to their garden and start now?
Have some annuals in the mix so that you get immediate sort of success. Yeah. Immediate sort of feedback from your meadow, and that can be done. So that's one thing I would recommend. Put a few annuals in. I always advise people to start as small as they possibly can, a square metre. Right. Even start off with that. Get some very fresh seed. Make sure you've got a good seed mix, and then preferably it should be sown in the autumn. Get it in there before Christmas. That's what I'd say. Yeah. If you can get it in September, even better. It needs that cold fertilisation, the chilling, which is really important. You can mow it when it starts to come up and you can mow things right up until the end of March, but then after that you stop and you watch.
Right.
Make sure there's nothing nasty, but if you have weeds coming up, and we have weeds coming up in here, we've got docks and we've got hogweed and a few other things that we just sort of hand rogue out, and that's why I just say start small so you can keep an eye on it. If that's successful, then you can actually watch it, collect the seed, and then double the size. Go bigger, but don't bite off so much, then the disappointment is so much bigger if you don't get it right.
Keep it manageable. And you cut the grass really short.
Really short, and if you've got a scarifying blade on your mower, scarify it, rake it off. But make sure you're not taking the richest bit of your lawn to do it in. You want one of the poorest areas, because that's where you have the best success.
This is providing pleasure and inspiration to many, many people. But what's the plan for the future? Because we have lost so much.
For the Queen's Jubilee, for her coronation, His Royal Highness set up the Coronation Meadows scheme, which was picking 60 meadows across the country in 60 counties to create and use them as donor meadows for 60 new meadows.
And these were meadows that were unspoilt and full of wildflowers.
That's right.
As a result of the Coronation Meadow initiative, 88 new wildflower meadows have now been created across the country. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the countryside could look a bit more like this and less like a sort of industrial agricultural estate?
I hope we're around to see it, Mountie.
Highgrove is a major garden, full of lovely things, but nothing in it is lovelier than its wildflower meadow in its summer pomp. Thousands of people have been able to share the garden. And I can guarantee that every one of them has taken something of this meadow back home with them. Trevor, the Coronation Meadows scheme was a brilliantly simple idea, and I think you were involved in that.
That's right. Prince Charles, our patron, approached Plant Life and said, could he make his vision work? Could we make it a reality of creating these new meadows in every county? So one of my first jobs was to help identify which were the Coronation Meadows, those ancient sort of flagship meadows for each county, and this is one of them. This is the Coronation Meadow for Herefordshire.
So where are you now in terms of Coronation Meadows? What have we reached?
Over 2,000 acres of new meadow has been sown. I'm really lucky that I'm actually been involved with this at my home up in North Wales. So we've got the Conway Coronation Meadow, the new meadow that's been seeded there. And to be honest, it's been an absolute joy for me to see that evolution of that meadow. It's only when you do it, and do it yourself, that you realise what's involved and that joy of seeing this meadow blossom in front of your very eyes. It's amazing.
Whilst many of the Coronation Meadows have been preserved for a long time, some of them centuries, a few have been made recently. And we went to the Lincolnshire Wolds to visit one of the Coronation Meadows that is the result of the work of Harry Turner, who took it upon himself to rectify the situation of vanishing meadows in his area and create his own.
It's an area of outstanding natural beauty. I know that's a fairly well-used phrase, but it really is a little bit something out of the ordinary. There's acres and acres and acres, but there wouldn't be if I hadn't sown the seed and planted the plants. My name is Harry Turner, and I live in Louth in Lincolnshire. I'm 87 and a bit. I'll be 88 in November. The Wildflower Meadow, it's a meadow now, but it was an arable field. There's 60 acres of it, and it's been growing barley and wheat for, I would think, at least 60 years. I had been thinking about this for many years, about wildflowers. There's lots of people in Lincolnshire as used to seeing all these wildflowers. They realised they was disappearing, and they was disappearing fast. Well, my involvement goes back for about 18 years, I reckon. The Wildlife Trust had bought this meadow, getting on for 60 acres, but then, well, we've got it, but what are we going to do with it? Somebody out the group says, we haven't got any flower-rich chalk downland. There's a chap here volunteering, he said he reckons he can have a go, and really this is the result, yeah. Flower-rich chalk downland, just those 4 words. And that's the 4 words I have kept in my mind for the last 18 years. I made a fairly big mistake for a start. I thought, well, cowslips, I'd have to grow them in pots. 125, I think. 3 years later, the cowslips had grown, made nice little plants. So I took them up to Red Hill and planted them, and well, thought, well done, boy, that looks great. But went next day to admire these flowers, the rabbits had dug the lot up. The rabbits, they dug the lot all, and I put them in a row, which I should never have done anyway. There's a mistakes you make when you start taking job on like this, aren't there, really? Now I sow everything from seed, And I try to aim for about 4 acres per year, and I have been doing that for a number of years now.
Harry is a remarkable man. He's absolutely fantastic. I met Harry 15 years ago, and he was given the objective of managing this site as producing a flower-rich chalk downland, and he's worked tirelessly ever since.
Right, well, I brought these, but I think I'm wasting my time by the looks of this lot over here, surely.
Harry has made a huge difference to this site, but also he's in the family of the volunteers for the Wildlife Trust. Without help from people like Harry and similar people, we just wouldn't be able to do what we do with our sites that we've done. So he's had a huge impact.
Well, this is how I planted many of the ones you see now in full flower. Do like all good gardeners do, make it fit. There we are, look. Looks as if it's been growing for years, doesn't it? And Mr. Rabbit can come and dig it out if he wants.
Chalk downland, the habitat has just been reduced by nearly 99% over the last 100 years or so. So our goal was to really try to restore this site into something of what it used to look like 100 years ago. Most of it is down to Harry, and to be able to do that by yourself is pretty fantastic.
It's a challenge, I know, but it's not hard work. It's something you like doing. One of the main reasons I started doing it, the insects, especially the butterflies up on the walls here, was getting less and less, and they rely on the wildflowers. Well, I stand in amazement, really, to just look at these wildflowers. And it's not just these, because when these die down, they'll go to seed. The plants you see as green, lovely green clumps like that, they will then come on, they'll put on their show. So we shall keep going on. I'm hoping to go on for another. I said I would go until I was 90, so I think I can whack it till I'm 90, so I hope so anyway. I feel pleased to be the man who started the Lincolnshire Coronation Meadow, and I hope somebody in the next few years will feel the same as I did all those 18 years ago and say, that's something we'll want to keep going.
That shows that an individual of any age can make a real difference. Now, we saw at Trentham how that you can take meadow flowers and use them in a number of ways in a garden and do something really interesting. And Carol is creating a border in her own garden based upon the relatives of our native wildflowers.
At a time when so many of our native habitats are disappearing, our gardens take on an even more important role. My garden is packed with flowers. Some of them are native, but many of them are exotic. In other words, they don't originate in the British Isles, but they still offer pollen and nectar to beneficial insects of every shape and size. One of the most important considerations when you're thinking about planting for wildlife, particularly for pollinators, is how densely you can pack them in together. The more you've got, the more your garden's going to be an oasis, a restaurant where insects are going to flock. Secondly, choose as many different flower forms as you possibly can. So big flowers like this cosmos that wave like flags. But on the other hand, things like this umbel, this dainty Orlea, will lure lots and lots of insects in, and they'll all be able to feed at the same time on these plateaus of flowers. And beside it, geranium pretense. It's got big single flowers, offers nectar and pollen, And nearly all the flowers are actually marked with pollen lines to lure those insects in. Which brings us on to the third point, which is try and make sure that there's something that those insects are going to be able to feast on right the way through the year. So once you've chosen your plants, and plenty of them, it's time to put them together. Not only are you going to please all those pollinators, but you're also going to create something beautiful for yourself. Well, I seldom get the opportunity to actually plant a whole new bed in this garden. And I'm going to fill it full of plants that pollinating insects will adore. This is Salvia caradonna, and I love these tall spikes and lots of small flowers, so lots of different insects will be able to feast at the same time. That's a start. I've got loads more to plant. Look at this smorgasbord of gorgeous plants. There's this aster, Fricatii monk. It's got this wonderful display of these big blue daisies right the way through from June until October. And if you look very carefully, this is where the business happens in the centre. So lots and lots of separate tiny flowers compose this central disc, and they're called disc florets. And here's another plant that's at the top of the insects agenda. It's a scabious. It's a hybrid scabious, but very closely related to lots of our native scabious. Once these flowers have fallen, they'll leave behind them these seed heads, and eventually those seed heads will sort of separate and the seed will drop to the floor. Birds love it. And one of the great things about it, as far as insects are concerned, is that it produces flower after flower after flower. Now, this is an eryngium. It's called Big Blue. What's so beautiful about it is these tremendous flowers. You can already see this whole collection of different flowers that are opening. And in this case, guarded, because right around the edge are these very, very sharp bracts. So it ensures that insects can get in there, and also no herbivore is going to come along and shoo it off. Well, I dare say these plants in my barrow would be visited by all sorts of creatures if we left them there. But the important thing is to get them into the ground. So that's coming in. It's lovely with this alchemilla. It's perfect for tiny little insects. Masses of these small flowers. I think it's an ideal companion. All these plants are fairly straightforward and accommodating to cultivate. If you find that they're pot-bound, just break up the roots, and that will encourage them to get established much more quickly. I think these look quite good. I mean, this is just a small corner, but you could just pick 2 or 3 of these plants, put them together in a pot, and it wouldn't matter that you didn't have a garden. Well, what was just an empty space a short while ago is soon going to be a buzz. It'll be a hive of activity. One of the greatest joys is sharing our gardens with other creatures. The benefits of providing flowers for pollinating insects are mutual. On the one hand, they get the pollen and nectar that they need for their survival. On the other hand, we get the benefits of enjoying beautiful flowers, accompanied by the fluttering of butterflies' wings and the hum of contented insects.
Some really good ideas there for making a beautiful border that is good for insects. Now, here are some things that you can do to encourage the wildlife in your garden this weekend, and a few things that you might not do as well. It's not too late to sow late flowering annuals like calendula and cornflowers to extend the season and give insects pollen and nectar to feed on over the coming months, as well as adding some late colour to your borders. Wildlife of all kinds needs ground cover for protection. So it's a good idea to leave spring bulb foliage to die back and not be too tidy in your garden. So leave areas of your lawn uncut and don't worry about a few weeds around the edges, because it's all great habitat for insects. And finally, sit back, relax and enjoy your garden. And if you've left a few areas to go wild, your local wildlife will thank you for it. Well, I hope you feel inspired now to help preserve the amazing wildflower meadows that we do have, and also to create something in your own garden that can continue that link right across the country. I will be back in my own garden next time. Until then, bye-bye.